Today is Friday, November 3rd, 2023. It's a day off for me, and Monday and Tuesday are also my holiday. So I have a 4 consecutive day holiday starting right now. So I will head out to Suncheon, then maybe drive to Seoul and come back tonight, or come back tomorrow. So I'm super excited. Nothing to do, but basically I would like to tour Seoul area and maybe buy some shirts and buy some other free cheap stuff and eat nice food. Speaking of nice food, as with yesterday, let's delve into the difference between soup, broth, stew, uh, bricks, consommes, broth, decoctions, concoctions, tinctures, and macerations. I told you that it's not masturbation, but not laceration either. Is maceration. So let's take a look into what the dictionary.com defines them. Okay, this is a perfectly different perspective. This view is not from the culinary experts or culinary nutritionists, but this view is from dictionary.com. So, and also I rely heavily on dictionary.com. It's a good source for your wordology. Okay, synonyms, antonyms, words, phrases, cliches, idioms, slangs. You can find them all in dictionary.com, and I'm trying to read this article to practice English by reading it aloud. While I am reading aloud, I usually walk like a roaming around in my living room. So that's how I do it every day. I set a mind to reading an English article each day. So that's why here I am. Stew versus soup. Simmer and the differences between them. Okay, that's good expression. Soup versus stew, broth versus soup, brisk versus soup, chowder versus soup. So those are the small subjects we are going to understand today, I think. I've never read this article before. Throw a bunch of ingredients in a pot, add liquid, heat it up, and what do you get? That's actually a harder question to answer than you might think. Dishes made in this way can be labeled soup, stew, broth, bisque, or chowder. When it comes to food, people have strong preferences, not only about taste, but also about what things are called. In this article, we'll get to the bottom of the bowl by explaining when and why a dish may be called a soup versus a stew, and breaking down the same distinctions between soup and broth, bisque, and chowder. Besides this, we know that there's a stock, concoctions, decoctions, tinctures, macerations, and all other verbs like a stir fry, deep fry, shallow fry, stew, steep, simmer, heartfelt, hearty, and what else? Stir fry and saute, right? Saute, wok, all sorts of things that are related to kitchenware and how we cook. When it comes to get to the bottom of the bowl, that's good cliche, right? Here, we will get to the bottom of the bowl. We will get to the bottom of the bowl. Quick summary. Generally speaking, a dish is called soup when it's primarily liquid based. Stews are thicker and chunkier. That's good expression. Definition. Soup is primarily liquid based. Stews are thicker and chunky soup, chunkier, right? Thicker and chunkier. But an especially thick and chunky soup could be called a stew. Broth is a liquid that serves as a main ingredient for many soups. When broth is dried and becomes hard, it's called stock. Stock, right? Stock. Broth or consommes if it has two or more ingredients. Broth is a liquid that serves as a main ingredient for many soups and can be considered a soup when eaten by itself. Bisque and chowder are different types of soup. Good. Bisque and chowder are different types of soup. It's a good summary, man. Broth. What is the difference between soup versus stew? The main characteristic of the dish we call soup is that it's primarily liquid based. Regardless, regardless of what other ingredients it has in it, meat, fish, vegetables, or whatever, they are either submerged or mostly submerged in the liquid or are blended as part of it. Right? The first example, let me stop here because I'm going to prepare salted peas for my breakfast. Yes, I just woke up and just a second. The first example, they are either submerged or mostly submerged in the liquid or blended as part of it. The first example constitutes what's often called a brothy soup. The second example is what we would usually call a creamy soup. Creamy as in texture. It may or may not have cream in it. Creamy. But there are a lot of variations, and this is where the plot thickens. The dish we call stew may start the same way as a soup, and can include many of the same ingredients used in soup: meat, fish, vegetables, whatever. Meat, fish, vegetables. Stews are cooked by simmering or slow boiling, known as stewing. Obviously, the descriptions of soup and stew sound very similar. The popular distinction between these two foods is how liquidy or how thick they are. A dish called soup typically has more liquid in it than a stew does. Stews are generally thicker than soups, being made up primarily of larger solid chunks of ingredients. In other words, stews are thicker and chunkier and always have solid ingredients. Generally speaking, if there is so much liquid that the ingredients are usually submerged, it's a soup. If the chunks dominate the dish, it's a stew. Of course, a dish labeled as a soup can be pretty thick and chunky. And sometimes cooking adjustments can turn one into another. A soup could become a stew if cooked long enough that most of the liquid boils off or is absorbed by the ingredients. Or you could add more liquid to a stew to make it soupier, right? The point at which a soup becomes a stew or vice versa can be endlessly debated. That's because there is no exact measurement or technical rule separating the two. In many cases, both words could be reasonably applied to the same dish. The difference is often simply a matter of preference or opinion. Okay, so 된장찌개, for example, in Korean, 된장찌개는 soup. 된장찌개 is a soup. 김치찌개 is a stew. Okay, jjigae, right? Jjigae. Especially the 김치국, jjigae, or 미역국, they could be classified as a soup, while other stuff with meat, fish, 갈치국, 갈치조림, all the 조림 belongs to all the 조림s belong to stew, right? That's the difference. Okay, broth versus soup. The essential ingredient in many soups is broth or stock. Broth is traditionally made by boiling or simmering water with ingredients that will give it flavor, such as meat, fish, or vegetables, and often a combination of things. The primary flavor of a broth is often specified: chicken broth, beef broth, vegetable broth, etc. For example, chicken noodle soup is traditionally made with chicken and noodles in a chicken broth. But can broth be considered soup by itself? Yes, in fact, when broth is eaten, even without any added ingredients, it is typically considered soup. For example, a type of clear soup known as consomme can be considered a broth if it is used as a base for the addition of other ingredients, but a soup if it is eaten by itself. Okay, consomme can be classified as a soup, clear soup, right? Bisque versus soup. A bisque is a type of thick soup that uses cream as a main ingredient. The term bisque is typically applied to soups that have some kind of a shellfish or vegetable as the key ingredient. Classic examples of bisques include lobster bisque, shrimp bisque, crab bisque, tomato bisque, and potato bisque. While most people agree that bisque is a type of a soup, some may distinguish creamy bisques from the non-creamy soups, in the same way that others distinguish liquid forward soups from chunky stews. So bisque uses cream, and there could be lobster bisque, shrimp bisque, crab bisque, tomato bisque, and potato bisque. So bisque has some kind of shellfish or vegetable as the key ingredient. Chowder versus soup. Chowder is a type of thick soup whose most traditional and well-known forms contain clams, fish, or other seafood, often in a creamy milk-based broth, and also featuring potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and other vegetables. So potatoes, they're all plural: potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and other vegetables. Different types of clam chowder are especially popular in the northeast region of the U.S. Other examples of chowder include fish chowder, corn chowder, and potato chowder. Most chowders are usually considered a type of soup, but their creamy thickness can also result in them being labeled as a stew. Some people may take the hard splitting even further and argue that chowder is its own unique thing in the same way that people distinguish soups from stews. So chowder versus soup. But before I go, I get confused about chowder and bisque, right? So I image. So those are chowder, very thick, thicker than creamy soup, which is bisque. So those dishes are chowder. Okay, so that's the clam chowder, this one, right? We see this a lot in Korean food industry, especially bakery or high-end restaurant. So they are called chowder and uses cream or milk. Okay, now let's go to mushroom cream soup. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This mushroom soup uses the cream or milk or both, but it's not chunkier, it's not thicker than chowder. So when we go to a Korean buffet in Korea, 버섯 soup, what else? The pumpkin soup, 호박죽, they are soup. They are correct. They are not chowder. You get to see and taste chowder when you go to Outback VIP VIPs and order a thick, creamy, chunkier chowder. Okay, so that's the difference between soup and chowder. Before we go, the expressions we learned from this article is that we will get to the bottom of the bowl, simmer, thicker and chunkier. Broth can be a stewing, simmer, broth and soup. Chowder for bisque, chowder. Bisque. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Friday.